Bad news from Museveni as Donald Trump delivers unexpected warning. Welcome to Kenya Lens Media, where you get news updates the way they break. And if you are new here, kindly we request you to consider subscribing. Now, the United States government has announced an immediate suspension of immigrant visa processing for dozens of countries, including Uganda. The move, effective January 21st, is part of the broader policy to overhaul that reflects the Trump administration's tightening stance on immigration and national security. U.S. officials say the suspension is a temporary security measure to press countries for better identity verification, criminal background checks, and information sharing protocols. Yet the impact on families, students, workers, and economies across the affected regions is profound, touching everything from kinship ties and academic ambitions and business relations. Under the new directive issued by the U.S. Department of State, immigrant visas, those that allow permanent residency, family reunification, employment-based migration, and related categories, will not be issued to nationals of the affected countries until further notice. Applicants from these nations will have their cases paused indefinitely, where the U.S. reassesses screening and vetting procedures aimed at preventing the entry of individuals deemed likely to rely on public assistance or pose security concerns. The freeze does not apply to all categories of travel. Non-immigrant visas such as tourist, study, business, and work visas are reportedly still being processed, though additional screening standards may apply. Diplomatic and official travel is also exempt from the suspension. The suspension builds a broader trend of travel and immigration restrictions under the current U.S. administration, which has already expanded entry bans and tightened rules related to asylum and citizenship processes since 2025. U.S. officials frame the visa suspension as a necessary step to ensure national security and proper vetting of incoming migrants. According to the State Department memo, the review will remain in place until the U.S. can be confident that immigrants from the listed countries will not become a public charge, a term used in U.S. immigration law for individuals likely to depend on government welfare programs. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other administration spokespeople have highlighted concerns of information sharing gaps, weak identity verification systems, and high visa overstay rates among certain nationalities. These gaps, they argue, hinder effective background checks and can intersect with the broader law enforcement and security risks. The policy reflects a long-standing legal authority under U.S. immigration law that allows the president to restrict admissibility of foreign nationals for national security or public safety reasons. Proponents of the restrictions say they are essential for safeguarding borders and protecting citizens, especially amid global instability. Reactions have been swift and largely critical among civil society groups, diaspora networks, and international analysts. Advocacy organizations describe the suspension as overly broad, punitive, and harmful to ordinary families rather than the targeted security measure the government portrays. Many argue the policy will separate families, disrupt academic pursuits, and undermine economic cooperation between the U.S. and Africa. Diaspora communities in the U.S. have expressed alarm, saying the move could tear apart family ties and create new barriers for students and professionals who contribute socially and economically to both their home countries and the United States. Critics also say the policy disappropriation, or rather disproportionately, affects African and Muslim majority nations, reinforcing perceptions of discriminatory immigration enforcement. Legal scholars know that similar restrictions in the past have faced litigation on constitutional and discrimination grounds. For example, the 2017 travel ban that ultimately reached the U.S. Supreme Court, while the current policy is being defended as administrative vetting, critics warn it could inspire new legal challenges. The suspension's practical impact is already being felt across affected nations and amongst their citizens abroad, such as families and relatives, students with plans to study in the US, business travelers and professionals, and also migration flows and remittances. Even people currently in the US with visas are already issued are largely unaffected, but new applicants and those pending approval will see their cases frozen. The policy also creates ambiguity for future planning as consular processing timelines become indefinite. The move reflects an escalation of restrictive immigration policies that the Trump administration has pursued since returning to office in the 2025. These policies have included expanded travel bans, more stringent asylum restrictions, and higher standards for proving financial self-sufficiency among immigrants. In mid-2025, Washington introduced a broader entry restriction on 39 countries through a presidential proclamation focused on national security and public safety concerns. That earlier measure already included several African states and set the stage for further restrictions like the current visa suspension. The latest directive also intersects with the sweeping visa freeze affecting 75 countries globally, highlighting how the policy extends beyond Africa to other regions including Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. For East Africa, the effects are uneven. Kenya and Burundi were reportedly exempted, while neighboring states including Somalia, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, South Sudan, and Sudan are included in the freeze. This uneven application has sparked diplomatic questions about criteria used for inclusion. U.S. immigration policy has long been a flashpoint in domestic and international politics. Historically, travel restrictions and visa suspensions have been justified using national security concerns. For instance, after the 9/11 attacks, but they have even sparked legal challenges and diplomatic strains. African nations have previously criticized unilateral travel bans and visa caps by Western countries as disproportionate and detrimental to development goals. These policies can deepen perceptions of unequal treatment and hinder collaborative effects on global challenges such as education, health, worker exchanges, and trade. Experts also point out that many African governments are already working to upgrade civil registration, identity system, and information sharing protocols with international partners, work that could be slowed if dialogue with the United States deteriorates. This visa suspension is more than a bureaucratic shift. It represents a significant escalation of U.S. immigration controls with broader implications. As the suspension unfolds, both countries and civil society groups will be watching closely to see whether negotiations resolve the cited concerns or if the freeze becomes a new normal in global migration policy.